Hi everyone, this presentation is going to be on accessibility and distance learning. My name is Julie Fuller. I'm an instructional designer at the University of North Florida. So let's take a look real quick at some of the universal design for learning principles that kind of relate to and fold into creating an accessible online course. So some of these principles include equitable use, flexibility in use, simple intuitive use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and the size and space for approach and use. And all of these principles are really speaking to not only your course content, but also the way that the students will interact with the learning management system, or the LMS. So when we talk specifically about accessibility, we're referring to students with a variety of abilities. So this might be some type of invisible disability, like a learning disability, or PTSD, or possibly a different kind of disability, like hard of hearing or low vision. So some students will maybe be in your class and they're going to be using screen readers. And some of the best approaches for designing an online course for a student who may be using this accommodation is to provide alt texts for links and images in your course, and that helps maintain equitable use of the learning management system. You also want to avoid long descriptions or lists in your course. A screen reader is going to be reading everything word for word, especially things like URLs. It will be read every little individual letter in that link that you might be providing. So this equates with low physical effort within the course. You also want to make sure that if you've got any tables or columns in any kind of documents, that you use column and table headings. And this is going to help facilitate the screen reader getting through and reading these tables and column headings accurately. You also want to make sure that you only use special text, like bolding your text, italicizing, underline, for emphasis only. And you want to limit colored font. So sometimes a concern is that online courses that are very text heavy can be really boring because there's nothing kind of spicing it up, so people throw in a lot of color. And that's not always accessible to all of your students, because if you have a student with low vision, they might not be seeing certain colors that you could be using. You also want to make sure that you limit images to things that are directly related to your content, that are really going to just help the students understand your material. If possible, provide closed captions for video content or some form of a transcript. This is especially important for students who may be hard of hearing or deaf. And you also want to avoid using acronyms, things like ASAP, FYI, stuff like that, because again, a screen reader is going to read those and it might not be exactly clear what is meant by that acronym. So if you're designing an online activity or an online course, you can create a consistent kind of congruent format in your course that will really help facilitate your students' learning of your course content by using a standardized font, creating clear and concise activity descriptions and directions, using alt tags where appropriate, having an easy to navigate course menu, and using succinct language throughout your course. So at the University of North Florida, we provide an online course template to our faculty if they would like to use something like that. And our LMS is Blackboard, just to give you a little bit of background. And our template ensures accessibility by providing, again, that standard font type and size, standard menu items in the course, standard course layout, and we also provide a link to a disability resource center within the course, and I know that it's also required in faculty's syllabi as well, so we're hitting them a couple different places. So the takeaway here is to think about designing your online course with universal design and accessibility principles in mind. This can eliminate having to backtrack later on to add some of these necessary components like captioning or alt tags or changing your font, if all of a sudden you find yourself with a student who needs accommodation in your course. So I hope that this presentation gave you a little bit of an introduction to accessibility and universal design for learning in an online course. And if you have any questions or want to just chat more about the topic, it's one of my professional interests. So please feel free to contact me. You can reach me at julie.fuller@unf.edu.